I'm going to be starting from near the end of it, and um, this video is going to encourage a lot of people to play this game. So you may not want to see the end of it, but I don't actually think that there's anything like a spoiler in this video, because I don't think this game has a narrative structure such as to allow a spoiler. So all this to say, if you watch this, you will see things that you might not want to see until the very end of the game. I can't get out. I can't remember how to get out. Here we go. So we're jumping in almost at the end of the kind of fiducial game. This is a game of many layers and no clear ending, but there is a point where you could call the game done, and I'm backtracking that last section. And the reason I've been inspired to make this video is because of watching a video by a video essayist I really enjoy called Joseph Anderson, who's made lots of great work, including a very well loved video about The Witness. And I think that video has some excellent observations in it and is completely true to the person making it and their experience with the game. I'm not here to say that they are wrong. Their experience is their own. Their world is the world they live in. But I am here to say that there's some very different ways to approach the game and to think about the game, and that exploring that teaches us not just about how we can approach a game like this or how we can approach games in general, but is a relatively deep insight into how we can approach learning in general. Specifically, something that's very close to my heart, the learning and teaching of mathematics and mathematical concepts. Now, if you've never seen The Witness before, or even if you have, you might be shocked, and I hope you'll agree, that it is beautiful. It is a really stunning world. Not actually very high-tech, high-poly, but just particularly the colour palettes, the use of light and dark, just the vibrancy of the world make it a real joy to explore. Now, I've walked past many of them by now, but I'm going to go to a central place. The Witness is full of a particular kind of puzzle, and both why it's loved and enjoyed, and often why it's disliked, relate to how people experience and enjoy and learn through that puzzle. And that puzzle is, at its most simplest, a person going through a maze. I did not realise these were here. For another time. Let's see if we can find a good example. This game is taking a lot from games like Myst. If you're watching this on Twitch, the service I'm using doesn't know the name of this game, so I called it Firewatch. But it isn't quite a walking simulator in that it's not got a strong narrative like a game like Gone Home or Dear Esther. There's no directional way through it. It's this sombre and relatively unclear exploration of mazes and puzzles and thinking and being stuck and coming to understand the world. So here we go, let's start with these puzzles. This is a good example. So all of these puzzles are, you have to start at a circle and eventually leave the maze. But as they go, they pick up rules. So this puzzle here has two rules in it. It has, you have to cover each and every one of these black dots. So I have to basically fill up the grid for this one, and you have to enclose a shape that looks like this one, but can be rotated at any angle. So this is not a viable solution, because we can see that I'm never going to be able to get up here and get back. The fact that this is here, I know that the solution was just up, but I've already forgotten it. I think this is it, yeah. This will do. The fact that this shape is here means that I basically have to immediately enclose it. I can't get very far in the maze without enclosing it, because if I tried to, for example, go over here, I would get stuck in various ways. There may be, a lot of these puzzles there's multiple solutions to. In fact, this is a different solution to the one that I just did. Now, because all these puzzles have been solved, nothing will happen, but a lot of these you'll start with one like this, and then when you complete it, this panel will light up, then this one. And as we go through, we can see that we're adding more rules to it. In fact, something that's lovely about this one is that effectively we're just adding a single extra rule. So in this one, you have to include one extra block in this shape. So we have the Tetris block plus 1. And then we still have to cover all the dots. In this one, we have the Tetris block plus 2. And we can put them anywhere. We just have to make the whole shape. This one we have 2 Tetris blocks, and this one finally we have 2 straight blocks. And these rules are taught to you basically by context. Or I would actually put it another way, I think these rules aren't taught to you. No one ever sits you down and teaches them. I'm going to go back to the start of the game to explore a bit what this means, because at the start of the game there are a few puzzles which are, in a way, more pedagogical. So quite early on, we come to just tracing this line back to this puzzle. And we could sit here and think, like, here's our start, but there are all these ends. And when I get the wrong one, we get this sad kind of noise. But stand here for long enough, and you might notice that actually this shape is this shape. And there is one particular feature in this shape, and it's this apple. And indeed that is a solution. The solution is the path which leads to this apple. But as we go forward, here we have another one where now there's no tree clearly in front of us, but if we wander around a bit, we find a tree here. Then we wander back and we can check, and we can even make sure that we're the right way around. I could look at this from 2 different directions. They're really discouraging it with all this foliage here, but I can verify that I'm looking at it from the right direction, because the rightmost branch is missing, and the rightmost branch is missing. And as we go through a challenge like this, the complexity amps up slightly. Here, the tree structure is finite, but the actual perspective is warped around. The tree has grown in this curling around itself manner. Not all puzzles are landscapes, some are purely spatial on the grid, and some are a mixture. Somewhere like here, we might think, okay, so that apple is here, so I'm going to go left, right, right, left, and come to left, right, right, left here. But actually, there's a telltale, which is that, again, there's a branch missing, and that's missing on this side, meaning that we're looking at this tree the wrong way around. And instead, we want to go right, left, left, right. right, left, left, right. I could quite happily explain each and every puzzle I come across in this game, because I think these puzzles are... they're not all great. There's many, many bad and frustrating and unclear puzzles, and that is part of what makes the game so interesting. It's also, we're just going through this unclear landscape where we have things like these strange mottled trees. And chances are, if I find the right place to stand, they themselves will make some pattern. Now, I said this was going to be a exploration of something that was said in a Joseph Anderson video, and let me start on what I mean by that. So I watched this Joseph Anderson video, and the video is titled, I'll try and remember to go back and put a link to it in the description, The Witness, a Great Game You Should Not Play. This is one of the first places where you're introduced to an actual new rule, which is that we have to separate black and white from each other. And his thesis was basically that the game was not clear. So this is also a perfectly valid solution. I think this is the only solution. There's a couple. I could do this as well. And I would not disagree with that. The game isn't entirely clear. But part of why he says it's not entirely clear is because of the order that he approached things, and him getting to things which were unapproachable. Him getting to things which were non-obvious, given what he'd seen so far. And this, for example, is a lovely challenge. Is a lovely side puzzle. I don't think I ever worked out what this is, but all of these vases have particular shapes. All of these puzzles rely on mirror images, where we can draw any particular line, and so all of these vases between them summarize the different shapes we can make. And when I draw a different shape, that different pedestal rises. Why does a particular pedestal rise? I don't actually yet know. And also throughout these puzzles, there is a kind of... each puzzle is slightly harder than the one before, or at least different from the one before. Like these just have breaks in them, so that there's some routes that you can't take. Here we have to deal with the piece of glass actually having melted, and therefore getting our mind around a distorted puzzle. And if you start playing this game, you'll wander for a bit and you'll quickly come across things that are beyond you. And in the way that we often talk about games and performance and what we see or want out of our media, the puzzles being unsolvable can be seen as a negative. And that's where I think games, sadly in general, don't look a lot like learning. Because in games there is this insinuation that if you're struggling, you're bad. That it is wrong to struggle, and that it is wrong to not be able to do something. You can get to the end of this game as in a meaningful, relatively climactic finish having not solved most of the puzzles. And that's very purposeful. That's so that you don't have to do everything to not get stuck. Equally, very little is gated from you. There's almost always a way to get to some place, even if you don't understand the puzzle. In Joseph Anderson's video, he talks about these as being puzzles which he didn't yet know the rules for, and therefore that shouldn't have been here. Now, I don't disagree that these puzzles are made hard. This one in particular, even if you see these shapes and you think, okay, so I've got to make this shape and of this shape, the leap of logic of, as long as they're both contained and allowed to swap them, is complex. The solution to this puzzle is completely non-obvious for someone coming through the first time. But you failing at solving this puzzle, when you come across it the first time, is neither a failure of yours or the game. It is, in fact, part of the success of you in the game. This game, more than almost any other, looks to me like mathematics. Not the thing you learn in school, this kind of blind arithmetic mathematics, but at the actual use of maths for real new problems. Where does this take me? Let's go this way. The world is full of these quite terrifying stone frozen people, and there are many dark overtones not very well not explained. I was about to say not very well explained, but I think they're explained exactly as much as they're intended to be. Like here, we are in a cement plant full of cement people, with a motif of a bird and a person holding or perhaps freeing that bird. Now, a lot of people, in a way that I find really sad, come to dislike mathematics because it is painful in a culture where you're supposed to get things right to not get things right. And the culture that we currently use for teaching mathematics suggests that you're supposed to get things right. This was something that shocked me when I went into the US academic system. My students expected the best ones to get full marks on a test. I think these have been done and they're just a timed thing, but maybe not. Let's try it. Here, as relatively clearly shown, we've got a branch we can trace out. And I think that that is at the root of a really negative way of viewing what learning and academic success is. So here we see the wire kind of goes underground, but it goes underground in this direction, so let's assume it's going to come up somewhere. Comes up there. This one's a bit wishy because, you know, there's actually only really one option which fits the shape. Let's see if this is right. Yeah. But that corner, you know, really looks better if it goes that way. There is an element of the approximate in these puzzles. That's good. The approximate is a really important part of learning and making new ideas. But one thing I found with my students who wanted to be getting full marks is that they feared the approximate. Because how do you know if you're absolutely right with an approximate answer? The solution, so here I think I've just got to stay within the shadow. Can I do anything about this break in the branch? I don't think so. Oh, maybe I need to. So how can I make my way around here without going through the break? And also, where is that break coming from? So this is the thing casting a shadow. Sometimes, while I'm playing this video, I will get stuck. So this is not the solution, because it's passing through the break, but actually we never need to go through a break, because we can go here. That's gone over there. Will it reappear somewhere here? Oh yeah, there it is. What's this thing? I mean, it's just a sort of thing. Also, we get these kind of puzzles, which I think are just beautiful. These do nothing for the completion of the game. They just wick their way over to the nearest monolith and inscribe themselves upon it. I think there is higher levels of completion of the game, but they are important. So, our green cable comes around here. We have one last shadow puzzle. Fear of failure is endemic in most learning cultures, because most learning cultures, as well as obliging fear of failure, they allow people through based on success. It's a really strong selection bias, for example, in academia, due to people fearing being incorrect. Now, on one half of this, I've got this shadow. So this path looks pretty good to me. On the other half, I've got this empty space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to link the two. And I'm going to say the right half is an empty space half. The left half is a filled space half. Yeah, that is. Et voila. So I work in part as a mathematician. Maybe I wonder if some mathematicians would object to me using that terminology, because I don't sit around writing theorems and proving them. I work in a much more pragmatic way, and in some ways a less rigorous way. I work as an astrophysicist, and I go and I see, is there some effect that we can't explain? Oops, someone's at the door, so I'm going to pause the recording. Can't do that, I'm just going to go out to the door. Okay, so I haven't actually yet learned how to edit videos, so this is staying in. Often we have these really approximate ways of thinking. We see some problem, we find some problem, and we've just got to try and work out, like, is there any clear way to solve this? By the way, there's definitely a way, in which all these flowers are an environmental puzzle. And often there isn't, because in real thinking work, that's dark, those are murder holes. In real thinking work, questions are often unanswerable. There is no guarantee that any mathematical question should be answerable. And instead, if you want to make progress in them at all and find the ones which are answerable, often the way to do it is by immersing yourself in them without requiring of yourself a clear solution. Accepting a position of lack of knowledge and then allowing yourself to just explore that position without obliging shockingly clear solutions. God, this is beautifully framed, isn't it? In this game you can unlock little lectures, and they include lectures by people like Richard Feynman and I think John Adams, and they're all about physics and metaphysics and knowledge and learning, and they're quite hard listening because they are all challenging what we know. In something I often talk about on stream, in vlogs, in just conversation with people, is Socrates. The first great philosopher of the school of Athens. Many great philosophers come out of Athens before and after, and I'm always very cautious to be pushing any kind of great person narrative. I think it often obfuscates people's work and their contribution more than it highlights it. But Socrates, one of the biggest things that he did in his life is one of the most kind of things that is frozen of his thoughts in culture, is that he realised that the people around him were much more certain than they could justify, than they had any right to be. He realised that most people were living in a culture of certainty that didn't make any sense and itself was undefensible. Oh look, here is definitely one. That could be a circle. Let's get up high somewhere. Maybe on this tower. Probably ends there. I'm sure, if anyone's watching this at home, that I'm walking past loads that you can be spotting and calling out, like, oh, look at that, go try that one. Nope, got to get higher still. This particular place, this town, is a sort of culmination of many difficult puzzles. And here we go. No, that is apparently not a full solution. Really? Yeah, just try the thing 3 times, that will make it work better. There's more to be understood here than even this. Is there some way off it? It's really flashing at me like it's a solution. Maybe we already got it. Maybe we already did it on our way through. So my partner and I, she mostly played, but we played through this together recently. I'd already been through it once, and she loved it, and she got really frustrated at it, and she found it beautiful and tedious and satisfying, and basically had a whole slew of emotions about it, because it keeps on pointing out ways in which you're wrong. It's all about highlighting ways in which you're wrong, and that's why I think it really shows a wonderful way of teaching, which is without judgment, or without forcing you, without pushing it down your throat. It's willing to say over and over again, let's find where you're wrong. And in my life as a physicist, that is one of the best ways I've found of finding a way to be right, is to find where I'm wrong. Because places that I'm wrong are normally the knock-on effect of some rotten assumption that might be quite deep down. Some misunderstanding that plays out kind of five moves along the chain until I'm solving a puzzle the wrong way. And this is something that anyone who's ever taught someone maths has seen all the time. That people are solving puzzles without actually quite understanding, by finding a alternative way of viewing the puzzle that is true in some cases but not true in all cases. So for example, I could solve both of these and I could think, okay, I don't know why I would think this, but here's an example. I could think that, oh, this means that above it there has to be a square. So that would make this the solution to this. And it isn't. And it's not too hard to see, like, okay, so these two must be together. Then this one raises the possibility that the shape doesn't have to be kind of centred. This one already isn't centred, but here there's no way to centre the square on here. Equally, it doesn't allow this to be a solution, which would be the solution if you just believed that this was telling you a shape and not also the dimensions. Instead, it's telling you both. It's telling you it has to be a 4x4 square. And this one raises the possibility that you might have to find this shape on a relatively large grid with quite a lot of options. Again, I don't think there's a single solution to this. This looks like it works fine as well. And then we go on. Now we move over to this side and we start getting, I think it starts here, start getting twos of shapes. So this one, there actually is only one choice we're making here. Everything else is chosen up until here, so if that one doesn't work, it's that one. So this suggests, okay, these shapes have to be ones, but then this one, you can't separate them. So okay, maybe my understanding wasn't quite correct. They don't have to be separate. They just have to add up. They just have to enclose that shape. Similarly, this can be a cube, a square, because these four can add up to a square. It can't, but it almost could, be this shape. The reason being that this single point is not enclosed within that shape. It can actually be this shape, where this point is here, and this shape is here. I think this one might have to be this. But it keeps giving you the opportunity to solve these things in different ways and to rethink how you solve them. So this one, perhaps there's some clever kind of secondary way to solve it. Maybe it's just showing that these two solutions are equivalent. The only thing that's changed here is this has moved one over. I guess it allows this one, where they move again, it reinforces like, oh, do the same thing, do the same thing. So it encourages you to do the same thing and check that, oh, the same thing does work. And it's really trying to push hard this quite abstract concept of these adding up. There's enough tests here that even if you started with some wrong assumption about the problem, you've probably solved it by now. There is one puzzle in this game, and I'm going to go and find it, that I think fails on this. Here's a lovely environmental puzzle where whatever shape I make, the walkways make that shape. 3 squares on their own over there, and eventually once it gets over there, a T shape over here. Those are some circles. Good circular shadows. I don't think it's down here, but I'm going to check it. It could be one of these. Yeah, I think it's this guy. Yep. So, down here we're combining two things. We're combining these shapes and these ones, which mean you can take away a block. And depending on how you think about that, one of these puzzles is not very solvable. So here, the rationale is that there's 4 blocks along the bottom, 4 blocks up here, they would overlap, apart from I can take away 1 block, leaving just the 3 and the 4. So far so good. Now here, I can take away 2 blocks. I can take away the one here, where it would be overlapping, and the one here, where it wouldn't. Okay. Here, I've got this shape just as this shape, and I just take away 1 at the top. And now here, this one, I struggled with for hours, my partner struggled with for hours, because the solution is horrible. The solution, and maybe pause the video here if you're watching and you want to try this at home, is 1L shape here, this shape crammed in the bottom left, and this shape crammed in the bottom right, and this shape up here. And then what that leaves is 1 block here, 1 block here, and 2 overlapping blocks here, such that when you subtract these 4 blocks, you've got 0, 0, 1, and 1. Now I think that's not the only possible solution, given the other things we've already seen. Sorry, it is the only possible solution, but it's not the only possible reading of what these things do. And I'm not arguing that this puzzle does not fit an internal logic, or even doesn't fit the style of the game. Maybe it just struggled with it, because sometimes you struggle with things. But this to me was the game at its worst in allowing me to struggle with a puzzle for not understanding the rules. Because also, I don't think there's many other places which use these rule sets. I don't think there's anywhere else where I could explore how these things worked. I think I'm going to stop here. These stream of consciousness videos are in desperate need of an editor. But I hope my thesis is clear. I don't disagree with the point that the game is at some points unforgiving, and even slightly delighting in an obscure and obtuse kind of difficulty. But if we view it as that difficulty is a burden, a punishment for not being good enough at the game, then the game is frustrating, kind of unfair, and is not going to be a pleasant experience. But if we instead view it as a slow meditation where we put puzzles in our head, give them time to percolate, give them time to try out different things, are willing to leave a problem half done, come back to it, are willing to approach problems in a much more meditative and less goal-orientated way. The game is easier, the game is more enjoyable, and there is more to be learned from the game. And that's why I'd encourage anyone to play this for the stuck moments. For that sense of release that you get from either completing them or leaving them, and for testing your own patience and your own mindfulness in being able to step away from a frustrating puzzle and do other things and think about things in other ways and come back and think about it again and look at it again and try it over and over again. Because this game is not supposed to have a direction through which you walk through it. I don't think it's even supposed to have very much of a solid, discrete end. I think it's supposed to be a slow and pleasant walk that you return to many times, and each time maybe find some new way to look at it, some new way to understand or solve problems that you've long been stuck on. And that, I think, is a much more positive lesson to take away from the game, and a much more positive way to view challenge and view difficulty. And no one is wrong to find a frustrating thing frustrating. If you don't have a saintly temperament, you're not a saint. In fact, saintly temperaments can be completely infuriating. But look at this path up here. That's surprising, this cloud is moving. I didn't think the clouds moved in the game. A weird world we live in. There's always more to find. A game like this, look at this map up here. Does it cast a shadow somewhere? Not very convincingly. Somewhere there will be a place to look at this where it just turns into an image. So I hope this has been enjoyable, and I hope it might encourage some people to go and explore not just this, but generally things that are beyond them, because everything should be beyond you until it isn't. Being flummoxed by something is... I thought maybe I could go down this branch. Is a positive part of working out how to solve it. And that frustration that we might feel is not attacking us. We're not feeling it because we are bad. We're just feeling it because sometimes things are difficult. And difficulty is endemic, it's everywhere. This is difficult. I don't know where to stand to see this. I can't quite see a way to put it together. Is that the round circle. Some games are truly difficult to be difficult. Some games are difficult because in difficulty you explore not just the game and the game world, but your own approach to the world. The world in general, the human world, the social world, the world of work, and of macroeconomics and... Can I go this way? Oh, I'm not sure I can. I wanted to get over there. You don't have to play for very long to find that these mazes that you're completing are on many levels deeply metaphorical for your state as the player character and as a person playing a game. You are hemmed in and being given this quite arbitrary task. You are trying to find a way out, but what you're trying to find a way out of is not exactly clear, and I would encourage a reading of the game where what you're trying to find a way out of is a place of ignorance about the rules of the game and a place of short-temperedness and about the way in which to approach the game. It's a good place to leave it. This grand statue, and standing in the right place, is in fact being helped by this solitary woman out on the edge of the world.